Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. I'm thrilled to tell you that our guest on today's show is David L. Jones. David works and teaches at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. David, it was so inspiring to talk with you and hear your cast iron introduction story. And it was especially exciting for me to hear about your side of UGA Iron. The Podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who's joined as a member on Patreon to help me afford the production costs of this show. And I'm so honored to say that this episode is brought to you by our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. For more information about Sloss Metal Arts programs, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. Now, for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and please enjoy. David Jones, welcome to the Podcast Iron. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for having me. I've been checking these out, and it's cool to actually get to be a part of one. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited because you went to undergrad at the University of Georgia, which we'll get to that later on down the line. But I think I told you before we started recording, but I'm really excited about maybe learning some, just extra little tidbits about UGA that, things that happened before I got there. So
it was a fun time. I swear it's one of the best times I've ever had in my life was, being part of all that and the people I went to school with and, how that all turned into kind of who I am now and what all it's kind of done for my life, I guess, as far as, the sculpture program at the time.
Well, let's start way back at the beginning and talk about maybe some formative memories that you have of childhood or just anything that you think maybe could be traced back, but also maybe circled forward into either iron casting or inclinations towards it.
The who in the hell are you part, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's been a little while since I've interviewed.
No, you're fine. I just remember that part. I'm like, oh, that's a good way to end.
No, I'm really glad that you remembered because it's like the token, like as is tradition. I went on vacation last week.
Good for
Part
you.
of the reason why I started doing them every 2 weeks was because I realized like if I keep doing these every single week, I'm gonna be editing like on vacation with my mom. And so yes, I'm glad that you reminded me.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
And David Jones, who the hell are you anyway?
My name is David Jones. Early on in the whole iron casting world, when I was kind of getting into it, people knew me as Spivey. That's a UGA story we'll get to at some point.
Okay, good. Because I just like a little introduction. I, for a while, thought that Jimbo was talking about two different people.
That was me. Yeah.
Like until I finally, one day we were sitting at his, I don't know if you ever were at the tall table, but in his house.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, all right, you gotta like lay it out for me. Like, who are these people? And that's when I found out that you and Spivey, you were Spivey, and like that's where the connection was made. Anyways, so
I got a lot of memories from that table specifically, and his old house too before the new one was built. The old anyway, we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get to it. I'm super excited.
Yeah, my name's David Jones. Some people know me as Spivey, but I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, which is like hour and 45 minutes or something like that from Athens. It's not too far. I grew up in Augusta. Career, education wise, I graduated in high school in 1995. Went to Georgia Southern for 2 years and realized that I'd probably end up dead or doing some really dumb shit as a college student that would have led to me in jail or dead or something at Georgia Southern, because it just wasn't challenging enough. And I don't know, it just kind of felt like a dead end. So a friend of mine convinced me to transfer to UGA because he was a business major. And at that point, I might even been a business major at that point. So anyway, I transferred to Georgia in 1997, I think. So, and then, yeah, I went to Georgia, did change my major to art.
Wait, but before we get into that though, like I want to know, like, because I know that you're big into hunting. Like
Yeah,
anything in like when you were a kid, was there anything about
yeah,
like building stuff or
yeah. And I meant to come back to that. I'm sorry, I
oh
kind of
we
went off
can
on
we
the
can come back to it.
university timeline tangent, but yeah. So when I grew up in Augusta, I mean, I grew up in kind of a normal neighborhood, but there was a lot of woods behind my house. I'm kind of curious to know if last time I checked when I went home, it I believe it kind of looked the same there, which was kind of surprising actually.
Yeah.
That would have been before COVID, so whenever that was, 2019 or something like that. But yeah, the one thing that kind of sticks out in my mind that kind of shaped who I am now, it's actually a couple of things. One was I always like doing things with my hands and building things. I mean, just that's what I did for fun. I would go dig holes in the yard for fun. I'm pretty sure that drove my parents crazy sometimes, but I did that. And I have ADD, and ADD later on, I was like, this is kind of my advantage. And this is why I like making sculpture because, I can't stand to sit still and like render something in a drawing class. I mean, I did okay enough in drawing classes, but I did not enjoy it, and so I'll come back to that. But those two things kind of worked to kind of shape who I am. And so, like, we were always building forts in the backyard. I don't know if you'd call it stealing or not, but I definitely pilfer building materials from construction sites in my neighborhood to make these forts. You just kind of wait until after 5 o'clock to do that, and
Yep.
you're good to go.
Yeah.
Probably got a couple of nails through my foot at that age. That was probably like fourth, fifth grade. I can remember, I took art classes, and I think because of the ADD, my mom and my dad, who got divorced, they got divorced when I was, I think, 6. And so, and then my mom remarried and my dad remarried, but, and then they both got divorced again and remarried again later on when I was like, later after I was married to Ashley, basically. But, anyway, because of the ADD, and that was kind of a new thing at my age when that would have been in the 80s, I guess. A lot of the suggestions were like, well, we should, if he's got ADD, why doesn't he do Suzuki violin lessons, for example, or sign him up for some art classes or anything that kind of makes him is creative, but it makes him concentrate, and, so you can work on how to focus on things. And I don't think any of that worked. I don't remember it ever working. I mean, I remember playing like organized sports like baseball or soccer, and none of that stuff I was ever good at just because wasn't that interested in it and couldn't focus that well. But anyway, I feel like that ability to just kind of live in your head that kind of comes as part of that whole ADD issue kind of helped shape me who I am, this ability to kind of take myself to a different place in my head and just zone out, as some people call it, kind of paid off later as far as art making goes. It's just a matter of learning how to channel it. And so I've always kind of been, when I've had students that I know have that now, I try to talk to them, be like, listen, I understand exactly what it's like to have what you have. And so here's, if you can learn to channel it. But anyway.
So childhood art classes weren't.
There was like art like you would take in public school, but then my parents would sign me up for an extra, like they knew this person that taught drawing, or they knew this person that taught I think I remember even taking like I don't even know what you call it now, but it would have been like a after hours ceramics class at the college in Augusta with my mom. And I did get interested in art in high school somewhat just because the class was there. I feel like I had a pretty decent art teacher, Deborah Katkoff. And so she was pretty encouraging and supportive. And I enjoyed it all throughout high school. But then again, it's like the same thing I hear now as a college professor. Well, what are you going to do with an art degree? It's the same thing we've all heard all the time.
Yeah.
It really gets old having to answer that question, but
yeah,
we all know that.
Yeah, but
we're
doing it, we're living it. So
and so I just remember thinking the same thing, like, yeah, you're right. What am I going to do with an art degree? And so, like my mom, she did do art as well. I feel like at times she really kind of was really into it and painted quite a bit. And at other times, she sold real estate for a while, and that kind of ate up most of her time. And then she kind of was painting a lot less. But then she would kind of come back to creative things, and she was always kind of supportive of me doing the same thing.
So when you switched your major in college to art, how did that go over?
Oh, they were just glad that I was my parents were just happy that I was enthusiastic about something. So to kind of give you a quick synopsis of my degrees as I went through those first 2 years of college, I think I started out at Georgia Southern, where I first started. They had a degree in building, contracting, and construction. And so I've always been pretty good at building or construction stuff. I mean, I'm building a studio for Ashley right now in my yard, and this will be my second full freestanding building that I built as a studio. I built additions on our house, and I've done quite a bit of construction stuff. And in high school and through college, I worked for my grandpa. He was a painting contractor, so I did a lot of that, like worked on new construction. Other jobs I've done industrial electrical work and things like that as an apprentice. But so that's always been something I'm good at. So my first degree, my first declaration of a degree as a freshman, was building, contracting, and construction at Georgia Southern. And I kept failing college algebra because I've never been good with math, and you had to pass that to get that degree. I mean, that was kind of like your basic math for them. And so then I got frustrated. My dad was a stockbroker for Merrill Lynch, and I was like, well, maybe I should just go into that. And so I took economics as a sophomore at Georgia Southern, and it was an 8:00 class, which I don't think nobody's a fan of that, but especially, there was pint night and there was pitcher night and all those stupid things. Of course, I was always hungover or asleep or something. So I got a D in economics, which my dad likes to remind me about sometimes when I ask him questions about certain things. But and I realized
let him have it.
It's fine. I was like, my heart's just not in this either.
Yeah.
And so about that same time, that sophomore year, I was like, I probably need to get the hell out of Statesboro and transfer somewhere where it's a little better seen for me. It's kind of dangerous down here for me. So I decided to transfer to UGA, and I'm pretty sure when I transferred, I just went ahead and said, I've always liked art. I always enjoyed art in high school. I was always okay at it. And so I did that. I decided to transfer into art. And so the first, is kind of the core sequence I think everybody takes, where it's drawing one, and then you take 2D design or color theory. I don't remember taking a 2D design, but it's a color theory, and did okay in those classes. I was kind of a B student. But then in the spring of, I think it would have been the spring of 1999, I took 3D design, and Jim Bonacorsi was my professor in 3D design.
No way.
Yeah. And so I just remember, I didn't know who he was. I remember he had just gotten back. I think spring semester he was in Cortona, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was in Cortona that fall. And, UGA at that time, I don't know how it is now, but there was the main art building, and then there was sculpture and graphic design was in this building.
Uh-huh.
And then metalsmith and everything was over past the stadium on that one
Yeah.
part of campus.
Yep.
And so it's not like you just bump into Jimbo in the main art building, or you bump into whoever. It's not like our building where I teach now, where everybody's in the same building. So
Yeah.
I just knew there was some dude named Bona Corsi. And I remember seeing this Cortona show and being like, that's the coolest damn thing I've ever seen. It was
it
Piccolo Mausoleo.
was it
piece.
With marble slabs?
Yeah, Carrara marble
as
slabs.
The roof.
It was the whole thing, the mausoleum. It was a small mausoleum is what that means in Italian. So Piccolo Mausoleo or something like that. If he's listening to this, he's going to give me shit about that later. But yeah, I think that was the name of it. It had a bronze casting of that figure that he does on the inside.
Yep. The head and shoulders. Yeah. The bust.
Yep. And then all this fabricated steel. And at the time I was like, I don't know who that is. Is that a student or is that a professor? I didn't know.
You didn't know.
There was no internet or anything.
Yeah.
It's like you took out a phone and there were no cell phones. So
yeah.
But then first day of 3D design, I kind of realized like, oh, that's the guy that made that.
That's that guy
that was in the main building. This is cool. And I don't know. You just know how like sometimes you meet somebody and you're like, you don't know why, but you can kind of tell you might relate to him because he grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia. There's quite a bit of difference as far as how we came up and all that. But I just remember meeting him and being like, I don't know why, but I think this is going to be pretty cool. I think I'm going to like this class. And also at the same time, I was trying to teach myself how to weld.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was just wanted to learn how to weld. Ever since I was a small child, I was always fascinated. I actually remember playing baseball or something, and there was a welder welding up the batting cage part of a baseball field opposite of where I was out in left field.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole time I'm staring at this dude welding instead of paying attention to the baseball game. ADD, right?
Yeah.
And I was just way into it. I was like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but that looks really cool. And I want to know what it is, And so I've always kind of had a thing where I've been interested in that. And so I remember sitting in like you had to think I'd take one to three basic kind of intro level art histories.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this book the whole time through art history about how to weld because I wasn't that interested in art history class. And wasn't a good student that way, but and that was the same semester I had 3D design with Jimbo. So
okay.
I think my first project, I was like, look, I know we're doing this in plaster and I'm, carve this thing, but I'm really interested in welding. Can I fabricate a base for this? Like I'll go buy the material and, I know there's stick welders because you showed them to us. And he's like, sure, have at it. Like he would say. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
I like this guy a lot. He's going to let me weld. Cool. And so that was 3D design, and I say this now at having taught college for some time now, like I miss the way things used to be where like, you get a grade in Jimbo's class, it'd be an A on a Post-it note like that. Yeah. That was the grade. There was no breakdown or anything. And it's like, you knew good and damn well why you got the grade you got. And you didn't need to question it because you understood. Either you did or didn't.
And he didn't need to justify it either. And even when I was in undergrad, it would be like, I'd get so I was a jewelry major for undergrad. I would get my little like shoebox back with my metals project in it. And there would be like a Post-it note with just like the grade. Yeah. It's just funny. Yeah.
Sure.
And they didn't have to justify it. They just, you knew what you kind of deserved.
Yeah. And at times now I've been able to kind of skirt that a little bit, but I'm just, we had a critique. You got the feedback. There's feedback. I don't need to write it again.
You know what you have to do.
Yeah. We don't live in that era, but anyway, that was at that point I was like, wow, this is something this is what I need to be doing from that point on. And literally from that point on until now, it's been the same. It's been one big long trajectory for me where it's like since I met Jimbo to now,
Yeah.
that's been it. There was that was it. It started there and it's still going.
So what happened next? Like, I mean, so was 3D design like just what we would think of typically, when I think of 3D design, I think of like plaster, wire, mat board, cutting and making shapes.
What do we do?
Stuff.
Yeah, the first 3D design project was the plaster carving project. We did that. There was basically a line, which line now would be whatever it is we teach here. I haven't taught 3D in a while, but probably using some sticks to make something. But line with him, we were using balun wire.
Yeah.
I was like, Jimbo, now that you let me weld, can I keep welding? Do I have to use this balun wire shit, or can I just use some pencil ride and I'll go buy it again? I don't care, but can I just do these? Like, sure, yeah, how about it? And I'm like, cool. Well, I'm going to be down there welding up something then. And so I don't even remember, I just made this kind of abstract form.
Yeah.
Using pencil ride. And you could tell some of the kids in the class were like, why the hell is he getting a weld? And I'm like, because I asked, man, this, I really want to do this. I'm interested in doing this. So anyway, yeah, I think that was my second project. And then the third project was the third one was like plain, right? And planar form. But the way he taught it was it was that half-inch blue insulating foam.
Yeah.
So he brought in that and a bunch of drywall mud. And then you had to pick an artist that you wanted to kind of reference with your project. And it was that egg drop project where you had to make something you threw off the side of the building, and the egg had to stay intact.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
I believe you. I just, because I didn't go to undergrad at UGA. So like so I'm taking I take your word for it, but that's amazing.
I'm pretty sure that's what we did.
Because by the time I was there, he wasn't teaching 3D design.
I hadn't taught 3D design in a while.
All the grad assistantship students were teaching 3D design. Like maybe Larry Millard may have taught 3D design or something.
And looking back on it, that was kind of the case when I was there after I took it.
Huh.
I think I just got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And if I, looking back on it, had I not had Jimbo in 3D design,
who knows?
I probably would have enjoyed 3D design, but there was that connection I had with him right off the bat. For whatever reason, I was like, I like this dude, like he seems like somebody I relate to, and
so was he like, you should take sculpture, or were you?
Probably both, but Jimbo being Jimbo, it was probably more like subtle, like him being him. I'm pretty sure it was more like, maybe you should think about doing this a little more. And that's probably all he said. Yeah. Which, for him then, and probably now even, that was like, no, really, you should go do this. But that was his way of saying it. And so that was in the spring semester. I took 3D design, and I know we're going to talk about iron casting, but I also want to point out, like, randomly, he was, I would say this now if I taught 3D design, I'd be like, hey, we're doing an iron pour, come check it out. Cause we always do that with our classes. Well, he did the same thing. And I was like, I have no idea what the hell that is, but I'm going to go do it. And so my first iron pour was in 3D design, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. I just showed up and I'm like, I don't know any of these people, but this is cool as shit.
Yeah. So these are like, these are my absolute favorite stories. So, so it was in that like courtyard area, or was it under? Did they have?
No, it was in the courtyard. No, this is way before Mother any of that was ever built.
Oh, okay.
This was a furnace that I think
Hook came up.
Yeah, Charles Hook came up and helped Jimbo build this furnace, and I knew it was later on. I understood this to be a Charlie Hook furnace because of the way the tweer covers were designed and everything, where it had drop down tweers. And I know Jimbo is always stuck with drop down tweers, but I remember specifically seeing one of Charles's furnaces later on down the road and be like, oh, that's exactly why those tweers look like they did. And so it was one of those, it was that furnace. It ran off a high volume blower, not a high pressure blower. And I didn't know this in 3D design clearly, but I remember it. And so I know, but, and then the ladle was a 4-person ladle.
Okay. Yes. I've been hearing more and more stories of these. Which
do work. But, as a 3D design student who never had seen any of this, I just thought it's cool. But they actually let me pour one tap, and I'm like, this is fucking insane, you know? Because I remember them tapping the furnace, and all the little angels fly out when they tap it. I'm like, I can't believe we're standing here and just, you know, all this is happening around us, and here we are going to pour these molds. And
yeah.
So that was my 3D design experience.
Yeah.
And that was in the spring of, like I said, I think 1998. And so then I took Sculpture 1 from a instructor named Jim Connect.
He wasn't there when I was there.
Yeah, I think he retired maybe the following year after I took Sculpture 1 from him that summer. But I took that, and I want to say I took like, actually, I think I took a full semester's worth of stuff. Anyway, I took Sculpture 1 and I took Printmaking 1 and Ceramics 1 all, I think, in that same summer. But Sculpture 1, I just loved. I was like, so you're just going to let us do whatever, you know? And, so I dabbled in everything to make this one project. So I did stone carving, aluminum casting, bronze casting, steel fabrication, fiberglass, wood, all in one project. And it was a man's, my scale, like life size, what he called mannequin, but he used the Native American term to define mannequins, not like mannequin in the mall, but mannequin as a figure. And so I did this like deer man.
Mm-hmm.
And then was like, this is what I'm doing from now on, and loved it. And then I had Jimbo again for metal fabrication that fall.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was so into, after that first iron pour, I remember not knowing it. And I'm like, well, there's all this iron. I guess we got to break it so we can pour iron at some point. I don't know when the next pour is, but I'm bored. So I'm going to go out here and smash up iron for a bit. And so I just got there and break up iron in that courtyard. And then finally, this is how I met Elizabeth Kronfeld, Biz.
Yeah.
And then eventually John Boy. But Biz came out one day and she's like, dude, it's kind of hot out here. We're not pouring iron until the fall. Why are you out here doing this? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to do it. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go. When are we doing this? That was cool. The coolest thing I've ever seen. When can we do it again? She's like, well, we'll do it again in the fall. Don't worry. I'm like, cool. Nice to meet you. And then that's how I kind of got to know her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was, but still, it all, for me, it all started with 3D design. And after that, I was like, I think I had to take more drawing classes just to get my degree. And
mm-hmm. Yeah, we all have to slog through. Yeah.
All I gave a damn about was taking more sculpture classes. That's all I literally gave a shit about, was being in there doing stuff.
So did they have, so when I was there was a specific foundry class, and so I stumbled on it.
Yeah.
And I've told the story in previous interviews, so I won't go into it, but I stumbled on it. And the first project was bronze and aluminum Ludo molds. And then the second project was sand molds with iron. And then the third project, he let us choose, the class, as a democracy.
Actually, my first foundry class was that same fall semester. So I had Jimbo for metal fabrication 1, and then I had Larry Millard for foundry. So Larry taught the foundry class that semester. I had it.
Okay.
And we still had iron pours.
Yeah.
And all that. But basically, they let me do this, I assume, but I know they did. But I know there's a difference between mixing materials and then double dipping on your projects. And I was fine with, just mixing materials. So I actually, in Jimbo's class, was casting stuff in bronze for the steel project I was working on. And then I was incorporating some fabricated steel into some of the stuff I was doing for Larry's class. And they were both good with it. So I was really able to kind of, not have to have everything divided up or truncated or whatever. I was able to just kind of mix and match things. And then I think I wanted to say I took stone carving from Horace that same semester. And Horace let me do the same thing. So between the three of those guys, I was able to stone carve and incorporate it with bronze, and then take bronze and incorporate it with stone carving, and just kind of mix and match. And I, looking back on that, that was that ADD thing resurfacing. If you think about it, I can do 5 things at once better than I can sit and do one thing at once. And so Um, I feel like I was pretty lucky that way that they let me grow as I wanted to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome that they were able
Yeah.
to. Yeah. So, um, tell me more about Iron at UGA.
I feel like I got kind of learned it, obviously I learned it from Jimbo, but then once I got to know Biz and I got to know John Boy, because at the time Biz was a grad student at UGA, her husband Matt was a grad student at Georgia State,
Right.
where they poured a lot, and we poured some, but Georgia State they poured all the time. So I got to go over to Georgia State with them every once in a while. And like, I remember helping Biz just because I wanted to learn and work. One of the things I've always liked about pouring iron is just the work,
Yeah.
not even what you're making, just like doing the work. But I remember helping her make a bunch of molds for a thesis show. And I remember helping John Boy with quite a few things. So when we would do iron pours, it was just such an exciting kind of time, because we would only have, I feel like we did, I want to say like 2 a year at that point, one in the spring or one in the fall and one in the spring. And I don't know, to me, it was just, I don't know what it was about it. I got so excited about because I never have been one of those artists that like, they just cast iron and they just make cast iron work. It's always been a component here and there, but it's never been the sole focus of what I do, nor is anything. I mean, I've always, there for a while is pretty fabrication heavy steel wise, but then even that now I do some of it, but I do a little bit of everything.
I think that that's actually really important point to bring up because as I'm doing these interviews, I'm finding that more and more that there's this, like, I think that we all have, and there are some people that just do iron casting, but
Yeah.
there's actually, everybody is really well-rounded. Everybody pulls from different materials. They might have a piece or two that's just like purely cast iron, but
Sure.
I think that more people relate to what you just said than you might
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, for me, there has to be a logical reason to use it. So if you're referencing a certain era of history, i.e. the industrial revolution, then it makes sense to use it. Or if if you're trying to reference something from that era or whatever, then it makes sense. But I've just never been able to like, this is what I'm doing. I'm casting this just because I want to cast something. There's always has had to be a good reason for it. So, but as far as the process goes, especially in those formative years, that's just the thing I've been in. I just was drawn. I just loved it. I loved hanging out with those guys. I loved drinking beer with those guys,
Yeah.
and I feel like by far the best conversations always happen around the tall table at Jimbo's house.
Yeah.
I think I learned more around that table than most anything, especially at that point. And it was those were my formative years. A lot of it around that particular table we're talking about. If it's got to be the same one.
I'm so, like, my heart is so warmed
Yeah.
that you knew exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
When I
Oh
said
yeah, I know
the
that
tall
table real
table.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a few crazy nights around that table. But yeah, I feel like there was this enthusiasm about it. And then on top of that, the people, the students I were hanging around with
And people were coming to
yeah.
UGA because during Remy's interview, he talked about going to UGA.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
his
do
first
remember
iron
that.
pour was, "Oh, we're going to the iron pour at UGA.
Yep.
Do you want to come?"
And I
So do you
remember
think
meeting
you
him
were
there.
there
Yeah, I was.
for his first one?
Yeah. I remember those guys really well because they all had on those silver fire suits, all of them. I was like, oh, those are all the guys from UT. I later learned that, but at the time I was just like, who's this crazy dude that's super enthusiastic about this, like above and beyond, like this, he had this weird intensity about him. And I didn't even, first time I met him, I thought he was a fun, I think he came for a pour and then he installed a show. And so I helped him install this, helped his, just because I wanted to learn, so I helped install the show. And I remember he had this one piece called Camp, which I think was referencing like a fish camp in Louisiana or something. Remy did. And it
Uh-huh.
was in that Thompson Gallery upstairs in the
Yeah.
old building. And yeah, I was drawn to Remy the same way. I was just like, oh, this guy's awesome too. Like these are my people,
Yeah.
they're crazy, but I love them. And obviously still do. But yeah, I remember meeting him. I want to say that was that fall pour of still 1998 when I
Mhm.
first met Remy. I'm pretty sure that's right. I forgot where I was going with all this,
Oh,
but
I mean,
anyway,
I
yeah,
think we were kind of just talking about UGA and iron, and I was
yeah,
trying to like pull some threads from Remy's, to
yeah.
make the connections, because it's like
That's when I first met Remy, and then over time, I really got to hang out with him a lot more. And of course, we're still good friends now. I was just texting him a minute ago, giving him a
yeah.
hard time about something. But yeah, that's how I met him. And then I got to be really good friends with Biz and John Boy,
Yeah.
to the point where they'd let me crash on the couch in the studio.
Mm-hmm,
John Boy and I had this thing because he and Biz were working on their thesis shows at the time, and I was just a student, undergrad student, but we'd pull all-nighters in the studio.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I did that for a whole semester pretty much. So that would have been probably in the spring of
So you were
99.
there. You were there when he built Mother in
I had
2000.
graduated. I was at SLOS at that point.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
let's
I
go
helped work on
through.
it.
Let's
We
go.
can, yeah, if you want to come back
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. Let's go through. So we talked about so do you want to talk about, because I feel like I could talk about UGA and iron all day.
Sure.
Like, but I feel like I want to make sure that we have time to get to SLOS, and then because you went to UT for grad
Not
school.
really. I did.
Yeah. So it's like, I want to make sure that we get to that.
Sure.
So,
So,
so let's talk
uh,
about maybe like as you graduated with your BFA, and like what led you,
yeah.
oh, did you go to SLOS with Jimbo?
I went to SLOS for the first time at the Southeastern Conference on Cast Iron Art in 1999, and I went with John Boy and Biz. I don't remember why Jimbo didn't go. He didn't go, but I could not tell you why. I don't remember.
That's okay. Yeah.
But I went with those guys. That's where I met Ashley for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know she talked about that. I remember hearing her.
Yeah, because she was coming. She was on her,
right.
was she always on her way to
Grad school.
start grad school? And so that's where she
Yeah.
met y'all there.
Yeah. And I remember seeing her and being like, something about her is pretty special too, but that took a while to materialize. But I know.
And sometimes it does. But you knew she was going to be coming
correct
to the home
yes.
headquarters. Yeah.
Yeah.
UGA.
So that was in the spring of 99. And then the fall of 99, Ashley was a grad student there. And that was my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the summer of 99, I built my first iron furnace as a class for Jimbo along with John Boy.
Okay. So you built it together.
Well, I built one and John Boy built one.
Oh, okay. So you built your own. And what was it like, split wind box? What was the ID? Tell me all the details.
What did John Boy do? John Boy didn't have a split one box. But he did use a high pressure blower, which is kind of like the same one everybody uses now, those Dayton blowers. And then mine, I modeled my wind box after a furnace I'd seen at Georgia State that I'm pretty sure George Beasley built that one, where it had this kind of tall, skinny wind box. And I think it had 4 tweers, but I ran a high pressure blower, or no, high volume, not high pressure. And it was a couplet. It wasn't a cupola. And again, like I did not know a lot at this time. So as the kind of finale for our summer furnace building project, we ran these furnaces and John Boy's ran awesome. Ashley was there. That was like her first like week in town. So she showed up and helped us.
Yeah.
John Boy's ran really well. I didn't burn mine in long enough and kind of hurried it and bridged the shit out of it.
Happens.
And I know, I'm sure Jimbo's got some good stories about that too, but yeah, bridged it. I do think, well, yeah, I know for a fact burning in longer obviously is what you got to do. But I do wonder too if I hadn't been running a high pressure blower, if it may have not made a difference or not. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it ended up being kind of a failure. But I kept the furnace,
Mm-hmm.
redid the wind box later on my senior year. Used the same high volume blower though,
Okay.
and I'll come back to this again. But like, because I know one of the questions you have a question about, like, what was one of your favorite iron pour memories, and I'll
Yeah.
get. But
Okay.
I made it a cupola instead of a couplet
Mm-hmm.
too, and as far as I know, that furnace still exists. My friend Jeff Crawford in North Carolina still has it because I gave it to him. I think he
Mm-hmm.
did a few modifications to it too, but it's his now. But it still exists, and so that was a long
Nice.
time ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then I graduated in the spring of 2000. Had my BFA show. We had this big iron pour in the spring because, like I said, every fall, every spring.
Yeah. Was
I,
that the time? Was by then he doing invitationals? Because I know that at a certain point.
I want to say that was called an invitational, but that particular pour in the spring, we can come back to it, but that was definitely probably my most favorite one.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that in the after show?
If you want to, sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we'll.
But as far as it being invitational, that one in particular, a lot of people showed up to. Like, I don't remember it until David Lobdell reminded me later, but he was there.
Oh,
I'm pretty
wow.
sure Skip was at that one. Dennis Peacock would always show up. I mean, there was a ton of people. Remy was there, of course. Um, that was a pretty epic weekend, as I remember it.
All right. We'll detail it in the after show.
Yeah, that was a good.
So you're graduated
I graduated.
and you had already been to Sloss for the
I'd been to
conference.
Sloss for a conference. That was it.
Okay.
And yeah. And then I graduated. I needed a job straight out of college. And so I ended up doing, working as an electrical apprentice for an industrial contractor in Athens.
Okay.
And did that whole summer. And because I got to be good friends with Matt and Biz and
Yeah.
Matt Eaton, I got to
Mm-hmm.
know him really well through all this. Matt Eaton was at that pour too, the epic one. So I got to be really good buddies with all those guys. And Eric was going to leave Sloss. And so when he left, there was an opening, and Matt and Biz and all those guys were like, "Hey, you should go talk to Paige Wainwright about that." And I did, and ended up getting, got a job there basically as part of the Emerging Artist in Residency program.
Yeah.
And so I started there in the fall. Where are we at? What year are we? Still 2000. And so I worked there with kind of a game plan of like, all right, I'm going to do this residency for a year and I'm going to apply to grad school in that fall, and Jimbo is kind of helping shepherd me through all that.
Yeah.
And so I did all that, applied to UT. I think I applied to LSU and applied to Notre Dame. I got into all three. And for whatever reason, when I visited UT, just kind of on a whim, which you were asking about Mother, this is how I ended up visiting UT. Was I came back for, I think it would have been the spring iron pour actually. And this is when I started dating Ashley.
Uh-huh.
And I was there hanging out with her as part of the when we first started dating. Of course, the first thing we did on a date weekend, like on our first date weekend, was we welded the wind box of Mother. Like, I remember that very well. Like, that was our first date weekend together. Was I remember being in that steel shop and helping.
I'm like gonna cry. That's so beautiful.
I remember welding that wind box. And then our second date weekend, I'm pretty sure we lined it with the old school. It's either fire, clay, and sand, or what's that shit called? Blast patch. It was either or, but I remember my first time I ever went on a date where I spent the weekend there and we worked on the wind box and worked on Mother.
Yeah.
And then the second date, we lined it. And I'm pretty sure our third date we poured with Mother. So that it's first run.
Wow.
And Dennis Peacock was there, but he had retired from UT. But he was like, "You should at least go by and look at that program
Yeah.
before you tell them no." And I'm like, "All right, I'll go look." And lo and behold, I ended up going there. But yeah, that's about the time Mother was built. Was after I had left when I was still at Sloss.
Wow. I've like stood on that wind box
Yeah.
because I helped reline it the last time it we relined it. John Springer sent him a bunch of
Oh,
castable
really?
refractory
Yeah.
with the needles in it.
Yeah.
And that would have been in the spring of 2012. And I have an aunt who I would go up and visit her in South Carolina for like Easter, Thanksgiving, blah blah
Right.
blah. But I remember the very first I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving or Easter, but
Mhm.
Jimbo said, "Hey kid, like," because he knew I was from Massachusetts, so I'm a fellow Yankee, and he was like, "Hey kid, I don't know if you have anywhere to go for the holiday, but Leanne and I are gonna have a little get together with some students if you want to." And so I had already, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to visit my aunt." But then the final Easter of my MFA, I had to call my aunt and say, "I'm sorry, I can't come to celebrate Easter with you because I'm relining my professor's furnace," like literally the day before Easter and like on Sunday Easter,
Oh
I
wow.
think. Yeah. And so I remember like so by that time, now I'm confiscating your interview, but I'm
No,
like
you're
not even
fine.
sorry about
Yeah.
it because
That's the
this is
connection. Yeah.
such a like wild. So they had the castable refractory. They rented a cement mixer because Jimbo was like, "I'm not gonna ruin one of my cement mixers for this, mixing the refractory." And so we rented a cement mixer from like Home Depot or whatever, and had a wheelbarrow that we hooked up to. And so at that point at UGA, they had a boob crane with electric chain hoist
Mhm.
for intended for the bull ladle. And so
Yep.
they hooked up this frigging wheelbarrow, figured out the balance of it so that we could pour the refractory from the cement mixer
Yeah.
into the wheelbarrow and then hoist the wheelbarrow up and drive it over and pour
Yeah.
it in. And I was standing on the furnace, like packing it down with 2x4s, packing it
Yeah. Get all
down.
your air bubbles out.
Yeah. And yeah, split. Yeah. Is Mother
It's a
split?
split Wimbots with two blowers.
No, I mean a split stack though. Is it
Yep.
a split stack?
It
So
is.
we probably rammed the bottom and then got lunch. Like he bought us all pizza, and then probably I don't really remember now. This is over
Probably
10
pizza
years
and
ago.
Budweiser.
He was like at that point it was Bush.
Oh wow.
It was Bush. Cause whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I
Yeah.
just like I don't know if I've ever told anybody that story of like I just remember the wheelbarrow careening up to me like almost as if it was like flying itself full of this like refractory with needles, and I'm standing on the wind box and I was like, this is like one of the coolest moments of my life. Anyways, so we
Yeah.
relined it in 2012, but I'm sure that it was lined
Oh, it'd probably been lined three or
a
four
couple.
times
Yeah.
prior, but I
Yeah.
know when I first started dating Ashley was when it was first built. And like I said,
Yeah.
we worked on that Wimbots together, and then pretty sure our second or third date weekend together, we lined it.
Yeah.
And then the following date weekend, we poured out
Poured
of it.
it. Yeah.
And then I'm pretty positive, and I could be wrong, but I think Jimbo's first trip to Sloss was we had this Sloss Invitational when I was still a
Okay.
resident there,
Okay.
and he brought Mother up,
Whoa.
and
What?
he brought Mother. It was him, Kevin Shine, Carl Billingsley, and a couple other people. Anyway, I helped them run Mother, and we used the jib crane off the back of his old flatbed to pick the ladle up, and we were pouring with that. I think that
I
was the
think
first
that
week I ever told Ashley I loved her. I mean, that was a crazy weekend. And so that was in the spring of 2001.
yeah,
But yeah. So yeah, to me, I guess there's quite a bit of significance to that furnace in particular, as far as my relationship with my now
yeah,
wife goes, is a lot of long nights fucking with that thing, either putting a fur fat rate in it or grinding on the wind box or whatever.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
so, I mean, furnaces, I feel like are such stoic things, because it's
Yeah.
like I like we were talking about before we started recording, like I've only met you in person one time,
Yeah.
but that furnace is so significant to both of us. And that wasn't
Yeah.
the first furnace that I ever ran on. He had a small pour, or well, I mean, it wasn't really a small pour, but it was Mother's Little Helper. It was the first
Yeah.
um furnace that I ever saw run. But it's funny too. I'm going to tell you this, and I'm telling you this, and I'm going to be saying it publicly because everybody's going to hear this. But so when I went to UGA, there was Mother and Mother's Little Helper, and they
Mhm.
look so like similar that
Mhm.
it didn't, to me, like if you show me a power hammer, like I'm from small metals, like there's certain machinery that like I ain't never seen anything like that before. And so
Right.
the the like style of it is so like regimented, and they're so similar that I thought that I'm going to say it. I thought that they were purchased. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Because
he
they're
had,
so similar.
and also his style is so like aesthetically industrial.
Yeah. Because the wind boxes, if I remember right, are all tread plate, right?
I
Feel like they are.
I don't remember, but it's like it just seemed like something that was like industrial available and
Yeah.
in different sizes.
Yeah. Because if you look at whitings, I
Yeah.
worked on a whiting when I was at Sloss. I helped set that whiting up, the one that's probably still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a line. You could buy them out of a catalog. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And what's funny is we've got a furnace here at UW now that I built, I don't remember now, probably 2013. But
Yeah.
it's a lot like Mother, same size, same
Mm-hmm.
diameter. It has a lid, but it has a split wind box and two
Mm-hmm.
blowers. And it's an absolute beast to run. Like you better be ready if you're running it, because
Whew.
you throw anything in it and it just goes, and
Yeah.
it's hard actually to kind of keep up with. But
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I do remember more
and
than,
Mother was that way, because I was like,
yeah.
man, you better be on your toes with that thing, because it's
Yeah.
not going down.
Yeah. And make sure you have enough places to put the metal, like, and be
Yeah,
able to get
it's just
there.
going to keep coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, so anyways, so you're at Sloss. So what were you doing there? Like it was a emerging artist
Yeah,
residence?
basically most of what I did there was just we did a ton of road pours. I mean, I feel like looking back on it, Sloss is where I really learned how to like pour a lot of metal all the time, just get kind of super consistent and efficient at it. And Alan Peterson was there with me, and Vaughn Randall and Joe McCreary. And so I got to learn a lot from those guys. I think Vaughn taught me quite a bit. I remember him telling me one time, he's like, just remember, this is cool, but it's just like that table saw sitting there. There's just another tool. So, it's great. But I was like, yeah, I agree. Like that's how it kind of factors in with what I do. Is it's a component. It's not the sole thing that I do.
And I remember that too. Jimbo really instilling that in all of us in the foundry class was like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be just a casting. He and
No.
my first, no, my first iron project was, it was wood, fiber, and then
Mhm.
also these like cast iron components. And I just remember like that was like something he always said was like, it's just an element. It shouldn't be, you can enjoy the process. You can enjoy mold making. You can enjoy pouring the iron. Like he would always say, like the night before an iron pour, he like dreamt of iron pouring, but
Yeah.
it also
I
was
always
like,
have. it's weird. I always have dreams about pouring iron with that guy and him telling me something, Jimbo, and Lobdell's usually in there occasionally or whatever, but it's always kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
Ashley's always in them, but yeah. I did. And I went into Sloss, with the plan that I was only going to be there for a year. In hindsight, would I have done anything differently? I mean, it's hard to answer that now because after I graduated from grad school, I got married to Ashley and now I'm here and have been here since. But would 2 years of Sloss been good for me? Probably. I feel like I was just kind of getting the hang of what to do with the material at that point.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like how to incorporate it better into my work and all that. And then I went to grad school and everything, it's grad school. So, that shakes everything up. But
Yeah.
I'm glad I did what I did. I just wonder about that some days.
I have a similar, like I graduated with the MFA from UGA and I immediately got a residency and moved to St. Louis. And then I moved to St. Louis in August, met my now husband like that October.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been here ever since. And it's fantastic here, but I sometimes feel like, I loved Athens and I loved the people and the community. And I felt like I had
great,
like a family there. And I kind of wish that I could have stayed and just like been an artist and maybe like I scooped ice cream at the Ben and Jerry's in the downtown
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like if I could have.
And I feel like, at Sloss, Birmingham, the city kind of took a while to grow on me, but then it did. And about the time it did is when I ended up, in grad school. So like I said, I don't regret anything. I just always wonder, like, what would happen if I had stayed another year or whatever, but
we'll never know.
Yeah.
But so you went to UT, but I feel like was there iron from Remy and Noah? Were they pouring iron there?
Yeah, they've been doing that for a while. And then, Dennis Peacock had retired. Jason Brown ended up, and Jennifer Odom both were the new faculty at that point. When I got there, I think Jennifer, I can't remember who, Jason, I think Jason's first year was my first year, actually. I'm pretty sure that's right. And then Jennifer had been there for 1 year before I got there. So I was there when Jennifer started her second year, and I was there when Jason started his first, which was kind of crazy because if you think about like sculpture programs or any art program, that's in a lot of ways that's starting over, and so I was part of them, that whole starting over of like the changing of the old guard from Dennis retiring and Remy not being there anymore, and Noah kind of not, Noah had graduated a while back, and so that really changed things, I guess. And so with that, they wanted to keep iron going, and they wanted to keep the foundry going. They wanted to have a ceramic shell set up and all that. And so basically that was my assistantship, was to, build another iron furnace. And so I'd actually brought the furnace I'd built at Georgia with me. And that was the first couple of years we poured with that there. And then I ended up building a coupolette that I still have here now. And we poured a lot with that. I mean, and that was, like, I feel like my second year of grad school, that's something I really focused on, is we do tons of like little pours, like not big, long production pours, but more like 1 and 2 tap. Like, hey, let's just cast some stuff because we got time and we got the resources to do it. And so, I think there was one semester we poured like 13 times.
Dang. Yeah.
And they're all small,
Yeah. But you had been doing a lot of pouring when you were at
Sloss.
That's
what we did at Sloss, was like, hey, we need to pour, these people paid to do these scratch plots, so we're going to pour 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's be 1 or 2 taps, and we do it all the time. And so I was pretty well conditioned to kind of do that kind of thing. And I feel like I learned a lot though, because we did it so much, like how to bounce back from something screwing up or whatever.
Yeah.
The furnace was screwing up, or because mistakes are going to happen, and so
Mhm. Yeah. Or conditions will be different
yeah,
depending.
always.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was grad school, and then Ashley and I'd been together for a bit at that point. She, I watched her thing like right before this, but we lived in that building with Jimbo and Leanne's. It was an old corner grocery store
Yeah.
in this pretty rough neighborhood called Lonsdale. And I think that's the only time in my life where I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to sleep with a loaded gun under my pillow. Like, I think I don't feel safe if I don't. So
He would tell stories. To be completely honest, though, I feel like he told more stories of his time in Louisiana.
who's that?
Jimbo.
Remy?
No,
Oh,
Jimbo.
oh
Because
yeah.
did
Yeah,
Jimbo teach
because
at
he had a guy.
LSU?
He did. And I remember his story about this dude tried to steal his window unit air conditioning while
Oh
he
my
was there.
God.
You probably heard that
I
too,
don't
but
know if I did. Remind me.
I think he was at LSU, and I know that LSU's where he really kind of got into like welding, well, he was always into welding, but I think he got more into it there. But I guess wherever he was staying when he was teaching at LSU, these apartments or whatever, it was a rough neighborhood. And
Yeah.
I remember him saying this guy was trying to get his window unit AC out of his apartment, and he like went and looked out the window. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And like the dude ran off. But
No, I don't think I heard about that one, but I do remember there was like something about like, well, I don't know if I should be telling these stories, but like, it was something like somebody was trying to break in
yeah,
and he just like maybe cocked a gun on the other side or something, or
oh,
maybe like
maybe
opened the
this
door with
might
the
be the
gun
same story.
and they took off because it was
Yeah, that
like,
usually
you're not,
works.
but you don't want to break into here, son. Like,
Yeah, and that might have been the same. That might have
yeah.
been the same thing. And Lonsdale was just a rough neighborhood. I remember when I went up there to look at Jimbo, and I actually took a road trip up there to look at the place I was going to rent from him, and we kind of checked in on it and checked out the building and made sure everything was fine. And I remember going, he's like, "Well, go get me some Budweiser." I'm like, "All right." And so I walked to this like corner grocery store in Lonsdale, and the first thing I saw like was this barn across the street about how it was like this kind of folk arty rant, I guess you would say, that somebody had painted on the side of this barn about how their brother had died from crack and gotten killed, and just about how drugs destroy lives and all this shit.
Yeah.
And so then I go into this store to buy some beer, and I buy the beer, and I'm like, of course, the dude behind the counter has like half-inch thick bulletproof glass and a 44 Magnum right beside the cash register. I'm like, where the fuck am I moving to? And then I
Yeah.
walk outside, and as I'm backing out, this little kid on the bike runs right behind me. He's like, and stops. He's like, hit me so I can sue you. And I'm like, no, dude. And then as
Wow.
I'm driving off, this other car goes by full of bullet holes, and I'm like, holy shit, what in the world is going on here? Like, I'm living here? Cool.
Welcome to
Hey.
Knoxville. Great.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So that was entertaining, I guess you could say. But one of the cool things about that neighborhood that I didn't realize until like my third year was there's a steel mill in my neighborhood, like 2 blocks away. And so our favorite thing, once we figured this out, was we would go sit in the parking lot of the steel mill and watch their slagger run. Like
Yeah.
Remy would come visit, or whoever would come visit, and be like, let's go sit in the parking lot and drink some beers and watch their slagger. Because
Yeah.
it was like, a 3-foot diameter stream of slag coming out of this big ass carbon arc furnace.
Wow. Yeah. I'd watch that and drink a
And so
beer.
that was our thing. Once we figured it out, it was like, let's go sit in the park lot
Yeah.
until the security guards run us off. And we would always do it though.
Yeah. They're probably like, these crazy people. What?
Like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because it's cool, man. It's cool to watch that much slag.
Yeah.
Look at
Come
it.
over here. Here's a beer.
Oh.
Like, sit down with us. Yeah. So you graduated and moved
In
to
2004. Yeah,
Wyoming.
I did. And that was Yeah, graduated. We got married that summer on June 12th. And then I moved out here. And then I started out doing what you're doing now as a preparator in the art museum here for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I feel like I learned a lot just about, because at that point, all I wanted to do was pour iron and fabricate steel and make mechanical things because
Yeah.
that's what I was doing at that point in my life
Yeah.
with my studio practice. And when I did the preparator work, I started getting more and more into like learning how to do woodworking because we had to build our own pedestals and do all
Okay.
that stuff. So I would do that. I learned a lot about that. And obviously art handling is a big thing and installing exhibitions.
Yeah.
I got really good at matting and framing because we always matted and framed our own work.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about being a preparator? How long have you been doing that now?
I got full time for a preparator in 2016, February of 2016. So
And this is all art preparator, or is this just art museum?
it well, so I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Like, so
I'm sorry,
I
you don't work for a you work for an art museum, not a natural history museum.
yeah, but the art museum that I worked at, so first I had part-time work and
Mhm.
people always ask me, how do you get into art handling? And it's like, well, you just gotta like get a part-time job as a preparator or like a
I
part-time
know.
job
Yep.
installing or just volunteer at you got to be able to say that you have art handling experience on your resume. Because when I
Right.
was actually working at the St. Louis Art Museum and I would see people applying because it was like one of the most sought after positions, it seemed. And um anybody, my supervisor, like the chief preparator,
Mhm.
anybody that applied that didn't have direct handling experience, he didn't even look at their resume. Like it didn't
Right.
matter if you had, like, he just wanted to know, did you handle artwork from a museum or a gallery or something like that? That was the
Right.
thing. So the art museum, I worked there for almost 5 years in St. Louis, and it was, there was quite a bit of artifacts, I guess you would say. So like
Yeah, that's what I get. That's
from
what I
like
was at.
indigenous cultures, we had a
Right.
big like
Mhm.
oceanic and African collection. And so there was art, Monets and Picassos and blah, 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 all that.
Right.
And a lot. But I was just like thinking if I could like drop any names of like famous
Oh, it's
sculptures,
fine.
but
I was just
whatever.
asking because, like career wise for me, that ended up being another form, thing that kind of formed who I am was with this art handling, learning how to handle art. We dealt with some artifacts. We had a lot of artifacts, or we still have a lot of artifacts in the collection. Um, and but a lot of the stuff we installed was, mostly contemporary art, but occasionally there would be a show that was all artifacts like oceanic stuff.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
A lot of Native American indigenous
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Some of that was in the collection. And so this was kind of a weird turn from going from grad school and picking up heavy things and slinging metal, not slinging metal around like performance wise, but like handling things roughly because this
Yes.
is your
Yes.
understanding of how to
Yeah.
handle art. And the next thing you know, you're a museum preparator where it's
You
a
got the
whole,
gloves on.
you know what I mean? Right. And
I
so that was kind
do.
of a big change, and
Yeah.
that's why I was asking you about it too, because I literally went from like pouring iron all the time and doing whatever and fabricating metal to, having a studio that actually had rented for me. But, like, you go from being a grad student to working, and
Yeah.
that's what I did all day. It was, very carefully handle things.
Yeah.
And
Very
so that was
calm.
kind of an odd transition for a
Yeah.
while, I feel like.
I mean, I like had a little bit of a different path because I was an artist. I went for a residency, but I ended up getting like an office job as the
Mhm.
gallery manager at this arts organization. And
Mhm.
then, so I was like working in an office, and then I ended up working at the art museum and blah, blah, blah. The interview it's about you. It's not about me. But
Right.
I felt like my experience in iron casting definitely helped positively for the preparator position, because I felt like, so a lot of the other preparators that I worked with at that time were either 2D like painters or printmakers, or had like gone to Kansas City Art Institute for printmaking or whatever. And so they didn't have the same like, have you helped somebody back up a forklift? No. Like, like, have you helped,
Right.
have you, set up a bridge crane? Or I'm sorry, have you set up a gantry? Like, I'd set up gantries. I had like worked on all of these like kind of like manual
Right.
levels. And so, we tried to move as much as we could with like hydraulic lifts, pallet jacks, everything like that. But every once in a while there would be something that it's like, no, we just gotta, all six of us, we just gotta fucking muscle this thing
Yep.
together.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my boss at the time and saying, it's amazing what you can do with six people. And so I learned that from, sculpture and mostly like iron casting. And I felt like that was a positive thing that I still to this day kind of like bring to the preparator side of things. But yeah, I learned a lot about.
Ultimately, right, it comes down to problem solving. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing I've loved most about.
Yeah.
More so about sculpture and iron casting, maybe even specifically, is, the problem solving aspect of it that you get from it. And like, well, how do we put this, these 2,000-pound mold halves together when we only have this thing and that thing, and we don't have what we actually need? How do we do it? But we have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that kind of prepares you later on down the road for, positions like that or anything where you have to think creatively in a way about how to solve a problem given what you have.
Yeah.
Sloss was always, kind of to come back to Sloss, at least when I was there, I know Sloss is a different place now, but when I was there, hardly any of it was paved. When I first got there, the whiting was there on the site somewhere, but it wasn't set up.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had some sheet metal sheds, and that was it. And a forklift with no brakes. And so to get the forklift to stop, you'd have to put it in reverse to get it to stop.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
And then put it in neutral once it stopped so that it didn't go backwards, because it still didn't have any brakes. And so we got pretty creative about, it really taught you kind of how to deal with, not having a lot to work with, and yet you still had to do these. And then our sand mixer at the time when I was there was just a 200-pound cement mixer that ran on 220, and so
wow.
I remember helping. We literally rammed up a whole pallet, a full 3,000-pound pallet of sand one time to make this giant casting for something Vaughn was doing as part of his job. And so we did that using that mixer, and that was it, and so it was kind of you kind of look back on those things and you think, well, this really, you really learned a lot by not having a lot to work with, and kind of making do with what you had.
And then that translates, translates into how we go forward with different problem solving. Yeah.
So yeah, basically what happened was, I moved out here in 2004, just, like anybody that graduates from graduate school is like, oh shit, I need a job. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And then I moved into, bumfuck Laramie, Wyoming. What am I going to do for a job? And Ashley talked to because Laramie's a tiny little town, and she had talked to the chief preparer at the art museum here. And he's like, well, so-and-so just, took a job elsewhere. So we need to hire an assistant preparator. So I was hired. And when I started with them, it was hourly, 3/4 time. And then it changed over to 3/4 time benefited, which was awesome. And then when Ashley was pregnant with Eli, it's like, I make so little money. It's either I quit my job and just be a stay-at-home dad, or I pick up some classes adjunct teaching and kind of break even paying for daycare, like that's how expensive daycare is. Made a little more money. So I did that for a while and, got my feet back wet in teaching after having been in grad school. And then our art department's shop tech had retired in 2011. And so when he retired, they rewrote that position so that it wasn't just a staff position tech. It was actually faculty. And this is a weird way to describe this, but this is what the university came up with. But I'm technically, my job description or my job title is academic professional research scientist, which is funny because I'm not a scientist. And I wish I could do all research, but I can't. But that's how it's written. And so I teach like 2 sections of a 1-hour credit, like wood shop class, kind of like nuts and bolts. Here's how to use the wood shop. And then I teach like the final BFA capstone, which is weird because I have them at the very beginning and at the very, very, very end. And so I teach that. And then I do all the things that a shop tech would do, but for the entire art department, not just sculpture. So basically I'm constantly fixing something and putting out fires a lot. And then I oversee safety. And then our new building that we're in, or that we've been in since I've had this job, has a pretty big art gallery. And so I'm the preparator for that, but I have interns.
Okay.
And then as I get my own studio and office as part of my job. So actually, my studio work's part of my job too. And then there's a bunch of other little bits and pieces, but job wise, that's what I do now. And what I do parallels tenure. So there, instead of it being like assistant and associate and full, it was assistant, associate, and then senior. And so now I'm finally a senior research scientist. Which is funny because again, I'm probably more of an engineer than I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
But that's been it's been a pretty wild ride, to get to this point as far as my job goes. And I have these discussions with other studio art friends of mine, but it's weird. Like when you're younger and you're just out of grad school, you're just itching to prove yourself in a lot of ways with your studio practice and exhibition opportunities and things like that. And then at some point you reach this, or at least for me, I feel like I reached this weird state of, I don't know if equilibrium is the right word for it, but all of a sudden shows just start kind of happening, and it's more a matter of keeping up. And it's not that I don't care about the shows. I do, and I love every opportunity, but it's just weird how that transition happens at some point in your career. You're like, wow, like the next several months are, I've got all these deadlines and I got to keep up with them, and it's cool, but it's kind of like, damn, it's a lot sometimes too, or, a lot, but not a lot. But it's weird how that kind of, it wasn't like it was subtle because it took years and years, but sometimes it's like, man, it was subtle, but it was kind of feels sudden sometimes too. Like, damn, now here's where I'm at. So not trying to jump to the hot on the horizon part, but that's kind of what I do. A lot of days is, I get to get in the studio some, but I'm like building Ashley's studio right now, which is cool in our yard. I think that'd be great for her. And then most days at work, it's just kind of, whatever's getting thrown at me is getting thrown at me. And, most days is pretty chill, but there's some days where you're like, holy shit, how could that many things break in one night?
Yeah. Sometimes we talk about, at my work, we talk about like all the bridges that are on fire. Cause it's like a couple of different analogies, like mixed together, like we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, or putting out fires at work. But it's like, we'll put that bridge out when it's actually on fire while we're on it before we get over it. Like,
It's like, I know that bridge is going to catch on fire for sure, but it's not on fire right now. And I'm not even standing on it. So I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my every week, where it's just like, okay, which fires are most immediate? And
I'll tell you like just a little tiny story. Like, when I first started working I don't know if I should tell this story actually, but when I first started working at the University Museum, some of the collection actually, unfortunately, is, got some pest infestations. A lot of things came to the museum already infested from the donor. And so we do the best we can to, when we find it, bag it, And, if it fits in our freezer, we'll stick it in the freezer, and it's,
Kill it, yeah.
we do the best we can to respect the objects and everything also. So it's like, well, now I'm getting too into the details, but there
No, I
was
know what you're talking about though.
like something that we could see this frass. And so for those of you who don't know, frass is like,
Poop.
it's the poops. Yeah. It's the
Bug
poop
poop.
from the bugs, but it looks like really fine. If you were going to think of powdered sugar, but it was this color of sawdust, that's frass. And not always, but a lot of times. And I was looking at, it was kind of like behind something. And so it's me and a grad assistant. And we were like looking behind just as my boss, the chief curator, came around, and she kind of startled us. And so we both were like, oh, and she was like, what were you guys looking at? And we were like, this, she's like, oh, I know about that. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
What? Like,
Yeah.
So there's some things that now that's like, you put thing on the back burner, or like, okay, that's on fire, but it's just smoldering right now. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
We'll get to it in a month and it'll be fine when it's actually on fire.
It's crazy how much I have those conversations in my head all the time. Like, okay, that's not really a real fire right now. It's just smoldering.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to it when we get to it. So let's see, where were we at? Let me try and pull the thread.
I think kind of where I'm at now, I guess. And
yeah. So do you want to talk about what's hot on the horizon?
Man, a lot of things. Ashley and I were awarded a public art commission on camp. It was an open call, but we got it for the campus here for a building called the Engineering Education and Research Building. But we got it literally that call, and we applied and were notified as everything shut down during COVID, like that week, basically. Like I remember getting that commission or finding out about it and being elated at one hand, and the other hand, you're like, well, fuck, what difference does it make if the world's coming to an end? Like I remember having that thing in my head, like, I don't know. Nobody knew at that point. It was March of 2020.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. And we're like, well, we'll try to deliver if the world doesn't come to an end. We'll try to meet these deadlines, and we'll try to do this and that. But at that point, nobody knew. And so that's coming close to being installed, though. As far as iron casting goes, we were basically the proposal we had, because it was for the engineering building. My assistant woodshop tech, his great grandfather held U.S. engineering license #1, was in the room in the Boston Scientific Society when Alexander Graham Bell was talking about the telephone.
Wow.
Like on that level. And so he had a surveyor's transit that he used to survey all of Albany County, which is the county we live in. And, he's a pretty famous guy.
Mm-hmm. And
so we're doing a 15-foot tall, not replica, but piece that references that surveyor's transit of his. So that's coming up soon, but we cast all the parts, all the knobs for it, because if you look at one of those, they're turn of the century. So everything's like cast bronze and fabricated.
And beautiful.
Copper and like a lot of metalsmithing actually too. And so all the knobs and everything we cast in iron. We did that last summer, but that's coming to a head. There's the Western Cast Iron Conference coming up in Vermilion that first week in October.
Yeah, it's October 5th through the 9th. I'm not telling you. I'm telling you. You have to
remind me, actually. I don't remember. I just know it's coming up. It's one of those fire things, right? It's like it will soon be ablaze. Now it's just it's starting to smolder a little more. But
it's like it's picking up a little bit of heat. There's like a little wind from. Yeah. I just bought my ticket. That's why I know the dates, because I just bought the ticket and I figured out my ride and when I'm going and when we're leaving and like all of that stuff. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the only thing I feel like I need to right now is it's not next week. And that's.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what everybody that's listening, come to the Western Conference in Vermilion, South Dakota.
It'll be awesome.
And it's not next week.
And it's not next week, because this week is September 12th, Tuesday.
And this will be going out like, I don't even know the date. When you're watching this, you know when it came out. But so
Yeah.
there's still plenty of time. I feel like online registration is available until like October 3rd or something. So,
That
and
sounds about right.
and I only know because I just looked it all up. But the theme is performance.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get back in the performance kind of, because all the pours that well, that's not true because I was at Trails and they had some performance stuff at Trails, but I'm excited to get some footage of some like,
Well, it's weird for me with that because I didn't, you know, as far as iron casting goes, I never came up around any of that. You know, it was always
oh
like,
yeah, Jimbo was,
and then drink beers and then chill,
yeah,
stay up too late drinking beer, basically.
I was talking to somebody in one interview and they were like, yeah, and then we went to Sloss and we got to see all the forbidden things because at
Oh, yeah.
UGA we never did reaction molds or burnout, like evacuation pour,
Yeah.
like we never poured into
Yeah.
styrofoam, we never poured
You know,
into
I think I poured into styrofoam, and in grad school, I did do a couple of I didn't even know they were called reaction molds, and that wasn't really my plan. My plan was actually make a finished thing, but I did pour into some logs with the intention of casting what was inside the log. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But yeah, that kind of got hardwired into me about the performance thing. Like, I feel like because we're talking about iron, we should, like two of the best performances I feel like I ever saw was when I first went to Sloss. Vaughn Randall had made this furnace, like this little 14-inch couplet thing on a pivot.
Oh,
And
like
then
it was 14 inches tall.
no, 14-inch diameter.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
but
On a
it
pivot.
pivoted, right? So like you could move it out of the way. It was like almost like no, I don't want to use the word centrifuge, but anyway, it pivoted out of the way. Like it had a counterweight at one end and a furnace at the other. And the blower was at the counterweight end and the tube went into the wind box. And then he made all these molds that interlocked, right? So and so they were column segments. And so he would pour one and he had it timed just right where as the well filled, he knew that the mold would chill enough that he could knock off the sand around it, take the cast iron column section, jack it up, stick another mold back up under it, and then the pour spout into the mold was kind of on the side, and then the furnace would pivot back around. He'd tap, and the furnace tapped just enough to fill the mold, but the two would fuse, and then he'd jack that up, and then he put another mold under it. And so he was basically casting into place this growing column
from the bottom and going up. Yeah.
Yep. And I to this day, I'm like, that's the coolest fucking performance. That's, to me is like, that's it, that's it. But
yeah, where are the pictures of this? Like, was anybody videotaping?
This was in the 90s, man. There weren't, I don't know. I'm sure it exists somewhere.
Anyways, so
the crazy thing was like, as he was doing this and it was at night, it's Birmingham in April. So there's this massive thunderstorm coming with lightning and shit going crazy. And I'm like, dude, you're casting a lightning rod.
Yeah.
I think he finally had to shut it down just because of that.
Yeah.
Because it got bad pretty quick. And then I saw George Beasley cast a X marks the spot thing at Sloss, and then they went and they poured it and carried it while it was still glowing hot. And these people are carrying this like glowing red hot cast iron X to go bury it somewhere at Sloss. Down the little railroad tracks where the ladle cars went.
Yeah.
And that was a cool performance. So those are the two, like, to me, it's like, I don't know what else you do after that, I can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my thing about performance iron, I guess.
I mean, I'm excited. So I, at Sloss, the first year I went was like 2011, and they had, pouring into ice, and they had like centrifugal force, little tiny molds and pouring into
Yeah.
logs. And, I saw all that, like, and not to like poo poo it, like it was crazy, amazing. And
Mhm.
like Kelly Ludeking was there doing his like
Mhm.
slush molds where you pour in and then kick it over and roll it around, like stuff like that. But when I went to Hays, Kansas, and, they were like, oh, so the performance pour is on this different lot. So like I had to get a ride over there, but I
Oh
brought my
yeah. Mhm.
leathers and was like,
And
yeah,
there was
I
a
just,
tornado,
yeah,
which kind of trumped the
which,
whole thing to me. It's like, oh, there's a tornado too. Cool.
yeah, I mean, because I think that when I was in Birmingham in 2011, I think that because there was a tornado, I don't know if it was a tornado, but I know that everybody had to go down
Yeah.
under Sloss. Um, I think that was, as a New Englander, the first time that I really
Yeah.
was ever like, I know that they had tornado sirens in Athens and they probably
Yeah.
would do
Yeah.
testing. I don't know, but like, I remember I was in a car when it, like, the sirens went off with a fellow grad student of mine from UGA, but he also worked at Sloss, this guy named Adam Bodine. And
Mhm.
he grew up in Birmingham, like went to UAB for for undergrad. Like, I was freaking out. And the other
Yeah.
person that I was with was like, haven't you ever seen Twister? And it was like, he was like ramping me up. And then my friend Adam,
Yeah.
who's like a local, was like, it won't come this way. Don't worry about it. And so I
Yeah.
missed going down into the catacombs because we were like on a beer run. So that's that
Eh,
story.
Probably more important.
Priorities. We have to have the beer. So but at Hayes, it poured. Do you remember right before the
Yeah.
performance
And
pour?
that tornado really was right there. You just couldn't see it
Wow,
for the rain, but yeah.
that's wild. And there was like that was when I really feel like I was on the floor and I was like, what is going on? Because there was so many things like on fire and burning and going up in flames. And that was
Mhm.
like, I feel like the first time I really had a taste of what performance iron, and that seems to be, kind of like a ongoing theme, I feel like, because then even the performances in Granite City, and I witnessed them. I know you couldn't go, but like, they were epic. And so I just
Mhm.
feel like Vermilion is going to be that
Yeah.
same, like, everybody's been chomping at the bit this whole time, prepping their shit, and
Yeah.
going to be
We
really good.
The other cool one of those two I mentioned, there's a third, like when Lobdell would do those OSB walls and they'd fling iron at it. And when you're watching it as a bystander, you're like, that is the most dangerous looking shit I've ever seen. But then he came up for 1 hour pours and we're like, well, if you're coming and you want to do it, we'll just build a giant, OSB wall. And I had lost a friend of mine. Ashley and I both had lost friend of ours to suicide like the weekend before that
Oh,
pour. It's just the way it went down. But I remember watching Ashley. I mean, I got up there and flung iron at it, and it was really cool. But then I remember watching her do it, and you could tell, like, without me standing there beside her, that there was obviously she was having this release of
mhm.
being upset and being frustrated as she was flinging this iron at this thing. And it was pretty amazing, like how cool it went down. But if you're standing there flinging it, it's actually going way away from you. It looks like
Mhm.
it's coming right at you, but if you're the one flinging it, it's hitting it and
Yeah.
really not anywhere near you, but it just looks so crazy.
It does. It does. So
Yeah.
they had a pour like that. Noah and Allison kind of like hosted Toby at Lohmeyer Sculpture Park in St. Louis.
Mhm.
And the preparator there at the time was also a guest on the show, Martin Linson. And so it was kind of like the three of them. And
Mhm.
then Toby brought some of his students from Hayes. And yeah, Lohmeyer Sculpture Park built a huge wall for this performance, and they called it Fire at Night. Well, it wasn't like fire at night, like trails fire at night, but there can be multiple fires at night. And
Sure.
so it was like a ton of community members. And that was the first time I'd ever seen, like, yeah, we just have these big wooden spoons and we just throw it at the wall. And I filmed a lot of that, and just like listening to the kids like laughing as they're like it's such a weird experience. Like it
Yeah.
just like, because they were having so much fun, but it's when you tell people about that, they're like,
Mhm.
y'all are crazy. And
Oh yeah.
and
And
we
it
kind
looks
of
crazy
are.
when you watch somebody doing it. It just seems absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous.
But yeah, it goes way up.
It kind of goes away from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got that coming up. Um, as far as the art thing goes, yeah, I mean, building actually a studio
Mm-hmm.
in my yard. That's really cool. Um, pretty sure I have some shows coming up as part of this collective that I'm a member of called the Land Art or Land Report Collective. I know we've got one in Birmingham in 2023, but I feel like we've got a couple more coming up here pretty soon. So I need to be on getting on that. This is a weird art project that, like, if you had told me this when I was an undergraduate student, even a graduate student, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? But I ended up being part of this project called SCREE, which stands for the Sesquicentennial Colorado River Exploring Expedition. And it was to commemorate the 150th anniversary of John Wesley Powell going down the Colorado River, which started in, the expedition started in Green River, Wyoming, and ended up in the mouth of the Virgin River in what is now Lake Mead. And if you've been paying attention to like the water issues in the West, Lake Mead's running out of water. So is Lake
Oh.
Powell. Like it's turning back into a river, which is a river runner. That's cool for me. But if you're living in Arizona, you're probably not, or California, you're probably not too happy. But anyway, that project, because Thomas Moran was on the second trip to
Mm-hmm.
help kind of sell the West, artists were asked to go on this trip. And so I ended up getting paid to run the Grand Canyon with these guys and just make art in the Grand Canyon while I was there. And there was all these exhibitions as part of this project. There ended up
Mm-hmm.
being a movie as part of this project. They randomly, because we had a film crew on a raft with like, I don't know, $100,000 worth of film gear.
Yeah.
They got all this footage. And so there's about to be a National Geographic episode about the Grand Canyon, and some of that footage is in that. And it's just like, of all the crazy things you end up doing career wise, like you never imagine yourself being an artist on a whitewater rafting trip, you know, and next thing you know, you're in National Geographic because of it. And I mean, it's wild.
That's really awesome to hear. Like
Yeah.
it's awesome to hear stories like that. Hear you talk about that, because it gives us hope that like things will come about. Opportunities
You
will
do.
just happen.
And that's what I was saying about being at that weird point in your career where all of a sudden you're just like, damn, the shows are just kind of, I don't, I don't need to seek anything out. They're just happening. And I don't mean that in a bragging way. It's just kind of a weird, um, I just remember being fresh out of grad school and chomping at the bit to do anything. And now I'm like, I don't need to do anything else. I'm good. Like I couldn't handle
Yeah.
another project. I mean, Ashley and I are also working on this mobile maker space project.
Right. She
Which,
mentioned about
yeah, which is a
trailers.
really cool thing, but we're just the build team for it. So we're just building out these trailers. I know how a 3D printer works. I know how a laser cutter works, but if I need something done, I just ask somebody that knows how to do it for me. But um, it's just weird to be involved on something on that with that much money behind it. I mean, it's $1.5 million project, but because we know how to build stuff and design things, here we are doing it. And
They need people like you to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and this will come up later in the advice part, but
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, do you think we're rolling into advice right now?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I thought about this a lot. I know I mentioned at the very, very, very beginning when we were talking about what I did as a kid and what my parents and all that my dad was a stockbroker. But one of the first things that comes to come to mind for me is, learn how the system works. Like I know there's all these conversations about equity and all these things, but to me, like the system is the system. And if you can learn how economics work, as boring as that may be, and I know I got a D in economics, I was talking about that early on, but I'm kind of playing catch up on that right now. Like, why is it when this thing happens, why does the stock market do this? Or like, why does this do this? And so this ties into my artwork more than anything, because artwork has something to do with that conceptually, but just understanding how the world around you works and how the systems work, whether you hate them or not, doesn't really matter that much, because they are what they are. But if you can understand that at a younger age, when you're getting your career started as an artist, you probably can make the system work to your advantage a little better. Does that make sense? I know that's vague, and I don't mean it to sound cryptic or whatever, but
No, it does make sense. It makes me want to ask, like, where's a good place to start?
I mean, if you're still in college right now, and as an undergraduate, especially, you're going to, as a grad student, just take a basic economics class, just so you understand, like, when this thing happens, like inflation is not as simple as it just being inflation. Inflation happens for reasons. And what are those reasons? It's not because some president did this thing, even though that could be a factor.
Yeah.
It's never that simple. It's
anything,
nothing about it is simple. It's more like an ecosystem, but just try to educate yourself. And on the topic of education, don't be afraid to always be a student, even though you're 45 years old. Like, try to learn as much as you can.
I mean, and also I asked that, but it's also like we have so much information at our fingertips with the internet. So it's like anybody who's a self-starter can, there's probably online classes. There may even be free online classes.
I would just say, as much as because let's face it, like it or not, we live in a world where you have to have money in order to do things. Even if it's go to an iron conference or whatever, it still costs something. And so the more you can understand about economics, how things work, why something seems like it's unfair or bullshit, the more educated you can be about these things, the better you can probably make the system work to your advantage. I'm not day trading and making a lot of money. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm not doing any of that, but it's good things people, I feel like, especially artists, should know.
Yeah. And I think that with some recent things that have happened, and like I've been kind of awakened to, like, I gotta get more educated about what's happening and how I can make my opinions and voices heard.
Yeah, and I mean, especially, maybe in my case it's a little different, or not different, but a lot of art does have to do with like the landscape and how the economy and what's going on in the economy affects remote places like the landscape where I live, because we're oil and gas and coal, and there's no demand for coal, then coal mines go away, or which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but as far as my studio work goes, that's something I've been interested in. And so if I'm giving an artist talk, or if I'm writing an artist statement, the more educated statement I can make, the more authority the work has, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's also just good knowledge to have. Like, why in the hell does gas cost so much right now? It's not that simple, actually, but things like that.
But it's good to be aware of. Like my dad always said, be aware, Laura, be aware of your surroundings. But I also feel like that could be a metaphor for like not just your physical surroundings, but like the economic climate, the political climate, your neighborhood.
Yeah, and we're definitely living in some very interesting times with political climate. I'm not going to go on. I could go on and on about that for another 3 hours.
That'll be the after show, folks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Don't be afraid to learn. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And the other thing is too, as far as, because I assume most people that are watching this podcast or one, probably into pouring iron because of, what the podcast is, but two, they like to do things with their hands. So don't, learn as many processes as you can, because as far as job wise go, you're talking about being preparators or doing woodworking as part of being a preparator or whatever. You'll be a more successful candidate for a job if you know how to do more things, simply put. So, and I'm always trying to tell my students that, like, you may be good at computer stuff, but you need to know how to do things with your hands too.
Yeah. I think that in my day-to-day job, like, so right now I make a lot of housings. I made a lot of housings at the St. Louis Art Museum, but now it's like we're going through an inventory and we're really looking at every single object and thinking about if it's stable, does it need a supportive structure? And I work with a lot of students. The art students typically are okay at this, like, but the history students or like the museum studies students are like, well, how did you know what to make to support that object? And it's like, I made it up. I just made it up. Like, this is not something that existed before and it existed now. And it was like,
it's funny. That's how it's
how
been with this mobile makerspace project. I mean, our engineering students have been actually pretty good at figuring out, like, well, if we 3D print this thing to do this thing and we'll draw it up in CAD, and sure as shit, they're really good at it. But then all the art students on this project are like, yeah, we'll go out here and build some cabinets. We'll rip down some plywood and they can do that. And so it's been a pretty fun dynamic. But if you can do both,
that's like,
you're a gem for a job anywhere,
Yeah. So, any more advice? Or do you want to go to the after show? I mean, we've been going for a while and
we can go to the after show.
Okay. Cause I'm really excited to hear about, I feel like you called it something like the big pour or the
epic one. Yeah.
The epic pour. I've been really excited to hear you tell about that. So, so for the public audience, I'm going to say goodbye to you I'll say thanks for being on the show today. And for everybody that's listening or watching, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to come over to the after show and hear David talk about the epic pour, then we'll see you over in the after show. But if not, we'll see you in the next episode. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. David's story is insightful and very exciting. I am eager to see what he has in store for the future with his career and his life overall. David, thank you for taking the time to let me interview you for this show. It was great to talk with a fellow artist and ironcaster. I think that goes without saying. But also to get a chance to talk to a fellow preparator and UGA alum was amazing. Your tales from Athens and the time before Mother have helped me fill in some gaps in my understanding of my, and I guess our cast iron bloodline from Jimbo. So if you're interested in seeing David's portfolio, you can visit his website and check out his work. And that's at davidlawrencejones.com. And for one last word of thanks to our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, as well as our other supporters on Patreon. The funds that they support me with are invaluable to help me to continue to produce these episodes. If you would like access to the after shows for as little as $1 a month, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. There, you can choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. But supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. And by now, you probably already know it's just an extra 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes more, with the show's guest where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story. So if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast Iron on Patreon, that's okay. Instead, if you could share the podcast with someone that you think would be interested in listening or watching, I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you happen to be watching this show on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the Podcast Iron channel. This way you can set up notifications for when each episode goes live. But also, I'm working towards 100 subscribers, and reaching that milestone will allow me to change the URL from a random arrangement of numbers and letters that I've been assigned. So for those of you who have subscribed, Thank you for helping me make this dream a reality. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.